moonshots are scary, and you won't get to the moon without them. Now, going deep back into my childhood, I think one of the lowest moments in my childhood was every time I finished Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. I would turn the last page and I would just weep because the book was over. And then I'd start again the next night. And the most amazing thing was lying in bed, curled up as a kid, and imagining those gates that no one was allowed into, and then they were opened up, and all the magic that was inside. And I think I've been lucky enough to end up at Google X, which, for those of you who don't know, is kind of like the Willy Wonka chocolate factory of Google. So we don't have big gates. We have a secret location, but we don't have big gates, and we don't have Oompa Loompas, but we do have things that are cooking, which hopefully will be magic. So a lot of people ask, well, what is a moonshot, and why is it important, and how do you decide what to do? And I just wanted to be clear that you guys should all leave today. I think it's very easy to look at moonshots and look at Google and say, well, I could never do that because I don't have a budget, or my boss wouldn't let me, or the team wouldn't be into it, or it's too far outside my comfort zone. And I wanted to talk a little bit about how we prioritise what Moonshot is. If you like, which candy bar Willy Wonka will make on a particular day. So here's basically what we look at. We have to take a huge problem. There has to be a radical solution, and there has to be some sort of breakthrough technology that's on the horizon. Closing the gap is something that I want to talk about in terms of creativity. I think there's a lot of creative people in the room. We've had a lot of discussions about what makes great creative. And I think that the industry has a fundamental broken problem. Historically, if you were in a factory, or if you were in a butcher shop, if you were a mechanic, the older you are, the more experienced you are, the more you know about what you do and how you do it. When we come to creativity, particularly in the digital age, the older you are, the less likely you are to know about what you do and how to do it. And I think that the biggest problem that we have is that the decision makers are up here, and the people who actually know how to build the stuff are down the bottom. They're young, they're often developers, they're creative technologists, they're 22 years old, they love getting paid in beer and pizza, and we're not bridging the gap. So I think a lot of CMOs, a lot of brand leaders, a lot of people who run agencies always want the oldest creative in the room, the most experienced creative, the person who has delivered on the creative nugget many, many times before. But I think the challenge, I'm not dismissing that, but I think the challenge is that so many of the people who live in the mediums where you want to execute great digital creative are right at the bottom of the food chain. And so how do we bridge that gap? How do we bring people closer together from a decision-making perspective to people who know how to build APIs, people who know how to implement APIs, people who know how to use products that the millennials that we talked about earlier are living in day to day. So I will often walk into creative meetings and say, I don't care how junior you are, I want your opinion, throw things at a wall, and let's see what sticks, because often the youngest person in the room will have the greatest insight into how to actually build great creative, or the platforms where great creative can run best. So try and bridge that gap. If you're a decision maker, try and bring them up. If you're a junior creative, you're probably not in this room, but if you are, talk to your decision makers and try and get a seat at the table. This is a lovely phrase that Robert Wong, who some of you might be familiar with, a wonderful creative director at the Google Creative Lab, where I spent a lot of time. And Robert says, we need to write the fiction of the science. And what does that mean? I think that we heard a bit this morning about the visual manifestation of ideas and how emotional they can be, and they're so much better and more powerful than a 50-slide deck. So I think it was like our sort of left brain, right brain, stage 1, stage 2, whatever we were talking about, but that emotional response to a poster is so much more visceral than an emotional response to a 50-slide deck. So I would encourage people to write the fiction of the science. Don't worry about the science. If you write the fiction, the science will follow along. We took a very unusual approach to glass when we, a year ago, launched the Explorer program. So we sat in a room and said, okay, how would our friends down the road do it? And our friends down the road would have done everything behind a curtain and would have popped out something amazing and beautifully designed, and that's fine. That's the way they do it. But we decided, rightly or wrongly, that we could put a whole bunch of smart people in a room and try and dictate what glass wearable computing should be. But it was much more interesting, insightful, and exciting to let the world come along and do it with us. And so not only do you get incredible evangelists, but you get authenticity. So not a single person in the Explorer program was given a device. Everybody paid. Didn't matter who you were. And that value is something that's been really interesting. So it doesn't matter if you're a multimillionaire, famous celebrity, you bought your device. Same with the North Carolina firefighter who put an Indiegogo fundraising campaign because he wanted to build apps for firefighters. These people are on a level playing field, and they give us feedback on how to develop the product and shape the product. And there's nothing more powerful than people in the world feeling like they have a stake in your brand and a legitimate way of helping you take it forward. People don't want to be preached to, they want to be included. No actors, no payments, real people excited about what you're doing. So making other people heroes is something that I think is really paramount. So again, here are the 4 principles that we sort of live and die by. We die by many more, but we live and die by these 4. So if you take something away today, moonshots are scary, but get uncomfortable. The world needs more discomfort and people getting out of their comfort zone. So it doesn't matter what you do, how can you push that a little bit further to actually make a difference? Close the gap between decision makers and doers. If you're the decision maker, and as I said, there's lots of you in the room, go and walk the factory floors. Go and find the young kid who actually knows where a lot of this is living in the world, where a lot of you are trying to execute campaigns. Write the fiction of the science and do it fast. If there's one thing I've learned from some pretty successful founders of Google is they're obsessed with velocity. Slow is death. So how do you move fast? Make, prototype. Don't do decks, make posters. It's much, much more compelling. And make other people heroes. They will always tell your story better than you can.